Let's look at converting recurring decimals into fractions. The first question says convert 0.4 recurring into a fraction. So the way we're going to start this question off is by labeling 0.4 recurring with the letter X. And rather than writing 0.4 recurring with the dot notation, we're going to write it out with a few decimal places. So 0.444444 and so on. Now the idea is to use this equation so that we can make another number that has 4 recurring within it. And so we can see that if we multiply 0.4 recurring by 10, we get 4.4 recurring. And so if we multiply the right hand side by 10, we also need to multiply the left hand side by 10. And so we end up with 10 times x, which is 10x, and 0.4 recurring times 10, which gives us 4.4 recurring. And we'll write out the 4's as we did before. Now, if we take away the two equations from each other, we can then cancel out the recurring 4's. And so we've got 10x minus x, which gives us 9x. And on the right hand side, we have 4.4 recurring minus 0.4 recurring, which gives us 4 minus 0, which is 4. And then the recurring 4's cancel out with each other. And so we're just left with 9x equals 4. And we can see that because the 4 in the tenths place value cancels with the 4 in the tenths place value in this number, and the 4 in the hundredths place value cancels with the 4 here, and so on. And so we're just left with 4. And so finally, if we solve for x, we can divide both sides by 9, which gives us x equals to 4 over 9. At the beginning, we labeled 0.4 recurring as x, and we can see that we've written x as a fraction. And so 0.4 recurring as a decimal is equal to 4 over 9 as a fraction. The second question says convert 0.65 recurring into a fraction. And so we'll start off by labeling 0.65 recurring as x, and again writing out the recurring part. So we have a dot on the 6 and a dot on the 5, which indicates that the recurring part starts from 6 and ends at 5. In other words, we can write this as 0.65, 65, 65, and so on. Now, as before, if we multiply by 10, we end up with 10x, which equals to 6.565656, and so on. Now, the issue here is that the recurring part doesn't quite match up for both of these numbers. At this point, we multiply by 10 again, and so we end up with 100x, which equals to 65.656565, and so on. And we see that the recurring part does match up between these two numbers. And so if we do 100x minus x, we then end up with 99x, and taking away the corresponding numbers, we have 65.65 recurring minus 0.65 recurring, which gives us 65, because the recurring parts cancel out. And so finally, dividing both sides by 99 gives us x equals to 65 over 99. And again, because we started off by labeling 0.65 recurring as x, and we've written it here as a fraction, we then have that 0.65 recurring is the same as 65 over 99 as a fraction. The third question says to convert 0.729 recurring into a fraction. And so we start off by labeling 0.729 recurring as x. Now, because the first dot is on the 7 and the last dot is on the 9, then any other digits in between are also part of what is recurring. And so this will be written as 0.729729, and so on. Now, if we multiply by 10, we would end up with 10x, which equals to 7.29729, and so on, which doesn't quite match up with the recurring parts. Multiplying by 10 again would give us 100x, which would equal to 72.9279279, and so on. Again, not quite matching up with the recurring parts of any of the other numbers before. If we again multiply by 10, then we end up with 1000x, which equals to 729.729729, and so on, which we see matches up with the first number, 0.729 recurring, in terms of the recurring parts. And so taking away 1000x from x gives us 999x. And on the right hand side, 729.729 recurring, take away 0.729 recurring gives us 729, because again, the recurring parts cancel. Finally, dividing both sides by 999 gives us that x equals to 729 over 999. In this case, 729 over 999 can be simplified further by dividing both numbers by 27, which gives us 27 over 37. And so we can write 0.729 recurring as 27 over 37 as a fraction. The final question says to convert 0.45 recurring into a fraction. And so in this case, we again start off by labeling 0.45 recurring as x. Now notice how the dot is only on the 5, which means that writing this number out gives us 0.4, and then the 5 is what is recurring. As before, if we multiply by 10, we end up with 10x, which equals to 4.5 recurring. And so we see that the recurring parts don't quite match up. So we can multiply by 10 again, which gives us 100x, which equals to 45.5 recurring. Now at this stage, we see that the recurring parts of 100x and 10x do match up, because the 5 is what is recurring in both of these numbers. And so we can take these away. And so 100x minus 10x gives us 90x, and 45.5 recurring minus 4.5 recurring gives us 41, because 45 minus 4 is 41, and the 5 recurring cancels out in both numbers. Finally, if we divide both sides by 90, we get x equals to 41 over 90. And so 0.45 recurring can be written as 41 over 90 as a fraction.